Welcome to Murder Mile UK True Crime. This isn't a video, it's an audio experience. The only images you'll need for this episode are these. So close your eyes, open your mind, and savour the sounds of Murder Mile. Were any of this brutal gang properly punished for their heinous crime? Find out on Murder Mile. Today I'm standing on Oxford Street in Soho, W1. 2 streets north of the senseless killing of Charlie Chirgwin. 2 streets south of Brian Robinson's racist attack. A few doors up from Jack Tratzard's family massacre. And 1 street south of the priest's hate-filled hanging. Coming soon to Murder Mile. At 185 Oxford Street currently stands a McDonald's. The creepy clown's house of barely edible burgers, where the less literate stare at a poorly paid server with a scowling face like a bulldog's angry anus, having waited 30 whole seconds, only to slam down a quid, not say thank you, shove this excuse for food into their gob, and then later squeeze it out. As made of chemicals, when the world ends, only 2 things will exist: cockroaches and the poo of McDonald's patrons. It's a horrible franchise where the dregs of society sit and grunt. Unsurprisingly, having been a haven for the ill-mannered and short-tempered, this McDonald's was the scene of a murder. On Monday the 12th of May 2008, at roughly 4:45 p.m, 2 so-called gangs, basically a group of unemployed boys who dreamed of being gangsters and yet never grew up, had a petty spat, the kind that even a 2-year-old toddler could resolve, which turned into a fight and ended with a death. It was the epitome of pointless. Yet it became a mere footnote when the press realised who the victim was, what he was charged with, and would have been convicted of. It was a crime so heinous that some said his killing was his just comeuppance, especially given how lightly his co-defendants were sentenced. But how far should a punishment go? And could any of these boys have been redeemed? My name is Michael, I'm your tour guide, and this is Murder Mile. Episode 319, Live by Hate, Die by Hate. It's an irony. As a victim, Steven Bigby was given a voice in death through his loved ones who painted a rose-tinted picture of his life by raising the good, glossing over the bad, and giving it a noble context. It's something we all do, as no one speaks ill of the dead. Yet as his alleged victim, a child known only as Girl A, had chosen to remain anonymous to protect what life she had left, her story is lost forever. Born in 1986, Steven Bigby, known as Biggs, was raised in Homerton and near the de Beauvoir estate, 2 impoverished parts of Hackney, East London, where crime is endemic. And as his sister Charlotte said, it's hard for a black guy to walk. He has to keep his head down if he wants to stay out of trouble. Unlike many, he had brains, having left school with several GCSEs, and being keen to do right by his mother Pearl, he'd enrolled in a business course at B6 Brookhouse College. And as a Christian, at times his faith in God was so strong that he'd even considered having a crucifix tattooed onto his chest. As the middle child of 3, times were hard as their father had abandoned them. As his friend Mark later said,
"He never talked about his dad. Maybe it's obvious, but he had no father figure."
Yet his mother more than made up for that, and against all odds, giving her children everything she could and striving so hard that at the time of his death, Steven's sister was able to go to university to study nursing. Pearl sometimes worked as many as 3 jobs, as a carer, a receptionist and a cleaner. But by 2000, when Steven was 17, it all got too much. And as Charlotte recalled, that's when the problem started. In his mid-teens, Steven said he worked for a guy in Dalston Market selling phones, but no one really knew the truth. Age 16, he dropped out of college where a brighter future lay. He doubted his faith, believing that God had forsaken him. And as Mark later said,
He looked up to the older gangsters in Holly Street, and when he got older, he liked that people gave him a little bit of respect straight away. He was all about respect. I think that's maybe what killed him. He puffed out his chest to the wrong guy.
Instead of choosing the route his family had, being focused on hard work and decency, he learned from the lazy, whose pathetic lives revolved around prison and parole, having stolen from the poor and the weak. Age 22, Steven had already spent several stints in prison. Defending him, his sister Charlotte said, "He used to rob brothels, drug dealers, bad people. I don't think he hurt anyone. It was dirty money." As if these were victimless crimes for an anti-hero who only did this to feed his family, and not his ego or his status. But every crime has a victim. And as you'll see, Girl A was treated as less than human. The countdown towards his death began when he joined the gang, Thugs from Africa. An abbreviation of Thugs from Africa, as proving you're illiterate, is supposedly fashionable, with it later changed to Thugs from Around, as they rejected the postcode rivalry that many gangs fight over, for territory they don't own. Mark said,
It's a brotherhood. We take care of each other. If one of us hasn't got something, we get it for him. You rely on each other, not just financially, but for stability, emotional support.
But it's also rampant with peer pressure, bickering, jealousy and fear. With no real understanding of what respect is or how it is earned, except by a bunch of deadbeats who will either end up in prison or dead by their early 20s, owing to a misguided belief that they're men, when in truth, they're nothing but lost boys. Mark later said,
I wish people would give him the credit for the good things he'd done.
Also admitting that he was a hungry boy who wanted money, fame and possessions. Yet others who remain nameless described him as a waste man, someone worthless, as he had scammed younger, weaker boys out of their money and drugs.
As if he didn't know you, he didn't give a shit about you. The same way that no one gives a shit about him now that he's dead.
Or as the evidence shows, the same way the gang felt about Girl A. In the latter years of his short and wasted life, he'd committed muggings, dealt skunk, robbed crack dealers, with his cohort claiming they threw it away,
as no one wants that stuff on the streets.
And at the time of his death, he was accused of wounding with intent and violent disorder, having stabbed a man in a Tottenham snooker hall. And bafflingly, he was also bailed for the sadistic attack on Girl A. With dreams of making it as a rapper, he admitted to his sister,
I want to wake up, change my life. You know what my problem is? I'm not focused. I need to get back to college, to be a better person.
On Monday the 12th of May 2008, Steven Bigby was meant to visit a recording studio to record some tracks and maybe change his life for the better. But having missed his bus, he and 4 pals went to Foot Locker on Oxford Street to buy some trainers. And feeling peckish, they stopped off at a McDonald's. Moments later, he was lying dead in the street. His life taken because of something utterly pointless. As the press dredged through his criminal past, his loved ones tried to ensure that his legacy wouldn't be one of a petty wannabe gangster. But although he was never convicted of this truly heinous crime, the question remains, would any of the gang who attacked Girl A ever be properly punished? It's uncertain how many members of the Tugs from Around gang there were, but at least 10 had attacked Girl A. Those named included Bradley Daly Smith, Bruno Abrantes, Miguel Almeida, Opeyemi Ismail, Hector Muaimba and Steven Bigby, all of them in their early 20s and living in disparate parts of North London, with 19-year-old Jason Brew and 17-year-old Rogel McMorris, who was said to be the main ringleader. Girl A was a 16-year-old Ghanaian girl who was raised in Tottenham to a loving family, and with severe learning difficulties, she had the mental age of an 8-year-old. Requesting anonymity, I can't tell you her backstory. I can only tell you about the horror inflicted upon her and the limited life she has now. As happens in all trials, attempts were made to discredit the victim, even one with learning difficulties. Rosina Cottage QC for the prosecution stated, "It's an age-old story of a girl with a number of sexual partners being labelled as dirty. But what had she done except to have sex with people who asked her to? She thought it would make her popular, being mentally challenged and easily led. And let's not forget, as all but one of these men were adults and she was a child, this wasn't casual sex, this was paedophilia." 2 days prior, 21-year-old father of 2, Bradley Daly Smith, admitted to having consensual sex with this schoolgirl, bragging,
"I did my thing with her, and that was it for me. I'm a well-known womanizer. People know me for that. Having sex with someone is no big deal."
summing up the gang's bad attitude. Earlier on Wednesday the 9th of January 2008, the night of the attack, the gang's defense counsel stated she had consensual sex with 3 unnamed men and later admitted to lying to police about a prior sexual assault in a car. In short, they had painted her as a slut. But it can easily be seen that they were adults coercing a vulnerable child for sex, which was a tactic they used before and would use again. Each man pleaded their innocence, so when some, but not all, were tried at Wood Green Crown Court, Girl A was forced to relive her horror. To protect her, she gave evidence via video link. Due to her learning difficulties, parts of the legal process were explained to her by a social worker, and her testimony had to be broken down into 20-minute sessions, as her wounds made it difficult for her to talk, sit, or be still, as the salt from her tears irritated her disfigured face. Yet as some of the gang sat in the dock, wearing crucifixes to paint themselves as sweet little angels, some smirked and snickered at what remained of the girl sat before them. Wednesday the 9th of January 2008 had been a bitterly cold winter's night, as the heavy rain turned to hail on Antill Road, a quiet residential street just south of Tottenham Hale Tube Station, comprising of 2-storey semi-detached houses from the last 2 centuries, which had sadly been blighted by the area's gang violence. At roughly 6:30 p.m, 17-year-old Rogel McMorris had lured Girl A to 27 Antill Road, a vacant terraced house which was currently being renovated, being filled with tools, plasterboard and chemicals to strip the paint. The prosecution stated she was shy and insecure with learning difficulties, having the mental age of an 8-year-old, and thought she would be liked by these boys if she had sex with them. But with McMorris having already texted the rest of the gang, she had no idea what was in store for her. As neighbours sat in the warmth of their homes watching television, McMorris broke into the dirty derelict house, lured her past the cold hollow ground floor rooms, up the ramshackle stairs to the filthy first floor, and to one of the 3 thin bedrooms, where on the bare floor lay a soiled mattress. She just wanted to be liked, and so agreed to have sex with McMorris. But waiting for her were the other 9 men. Outnumbered and overpowered, these savages stripped this vulnerable and defenseless girl naked. They forced her to perform oral sex on each and every one of them, violating her mouth for fun as this young girl swallowed what they made her swallow. And whether she cried or sobbed, that didn't matter. Over the next 2 hours, the gang took it in turns to rape her, savaging her vagina in this barely lit room, which was mostly illuminated by the stark lights of their phones as they filmed her terror. To them, she was a nothing, a nobody, just a warm hole to shove their penises in. And although she pleaded for them to stop by claiming she was on her period, not one of them did. None of them pitied her, as they continued laughing and filming, getting their jollies, only for many to later deny that they were even there. In court, their selfish attitude remained when confronted by the video link of the young girl whose life they had ruined forever. Rosina Cottage QC stated to the jury, "These young men are arrogant. Do you get the feeling that many of them felt that they should not be here? If they were all innocent, that would be right. But the prosecution says they are not. You have seen them talking in the dock, some of them lolling around, and at times making noises such as laughter, even during the evidence of the victim." But the 2-hour gang rape of this vulnerable child wasn't the worst part of her torture. With her semen spent, as used condoms littered the floor, they wiped their soiled penises on a towel in the bathroom. To humiliate and torment her further, McMorris threw washing powder at her face. And although Girl A was crouched naked and screaming, they kept filming as he scoured the house for something else to assault her with, having said that she had disrespected him by not sucking his dick. In the kitchen, under the sink, McMorris found a white tub of clear granules with a large red label. He claimed he didn't know what corrosive meant or what sodium hydroxide was, but as a 98% strength caustic soda, which the label stated was for stripping paint and cleaning drains. With no sympathy for the pain that she would endure, he only cared about whether it would destroy the forensic evidence of their crime. Girl A recalled, "I didn't know what was poured. It was some kind of acid, and it was burning. They were all around, just laughing. I was crying and screaming." As he tipped the granules on her face, genitals, buttocks, back and chest, as the chemical reacted with her sweat and burnt her bare flesh. A burn specialist later confirmed she suffered severe burns to 55% of her body, specifically her genitalia. And whether he had read the label or not, by pouring water over her blistering skin, the granules turned into pure acid, leaving her screaming in agony as large hot chunks of burning flesh fell from her body. Having used her, like cowards, they ran from the flat laughing, leaving her to die a painful death. No one will ever understand the agony she endured and continues to endure to this day. As the acid burned her lips and throat, a neighbour, coincidentally an off-duty police officer, heard her muffled screams, came to the window, and seeing the gang flee, at 8:20 p.m, she found Girl A on the doorstep, naked and burning, as caustic smoke rose from her red burning flesh and dissolved hair. Rushed to hospital, she survived, but only just. With extensive burns to her face, she could barely talk or breathe. Owing to the pain, the shock put her in a coma for several weeks. Unable to regulate her body temperature, being susceptible to infection, and having caused damage to her spine, she was left not only permanently disfigured for life, requiring numerous skin grafts and reconstructive surgeries, but suffering extreme PTSD Even 17 years on, she is still plagued by flashbacks, anxiety and depression. Judge Sean Lyons said,
"She will need lifelong treatment. It's doubtful whether she can fully operate as a young woman ever again."
And now being isolated, she's petrified of ever returning to Tottenham. She said, "I tried to forgive them, but it's so hard. I hope that one day they'll feel sorry for what they've done to me." Only they didn't. They bragged about it. Witnesses proved problematic, as Detective Constable Alex Newton said. A lack of cooperation by the community made it difficult to investigate. But whether they refused to speak through fear of the gang or distrust of the police, this was a vulnerable young child who'd been gang raped, burned, and left for dead. But as hard as the gang had tried to erase their crime, the scene was thick with evidence. With DNA on the towel, fingerprints in the bedroom, cell mass data from their phones, the photos and videos they'd taken, which identified some but not all of them, discarded clothes as they too had been burned by the caustic soda, the used condom wrappers which littered the floor, a confirmed sighting of Rogel McMorris and several other gang members, as well as the eyewitness testimony from the hospital bed of Girl A. Across the following weeks, 10 men were named, arrested and charged. But even with a wealth of evidence, barely any of them were actually convicted. On the 24th of October 2008, the trial began at Wood Green Crown Court in North London. Girl A said she was raped by 10 men, but 10 never stood trial, as 2 were released, and the charges against 20-year-old Opemi Ismail were dropped owing to insufficient evidence, taking the tally to just 7. As they all denied her rape and GBH, although still traumatized and in extreme pain, Girl A was forced to recount her testimony, no doubt exacerbated by the stress of hearing their voices via video link. Arrogant to the last, the self-professed womanizer Bradley Daly Smith denied that he intimidated witnesses, even though during the trial, some who said that they had seen him later said that they had made a mistake. He blamed his co-defendants, stating,
"What do you think I am? Some kind of mob boss? Half of those boys in the dock don't like me, and they all said I wasn't there. You've got nothing on me."
Claiming he was visiting his girlfriend in a hostel when Girl A was attacked. Before assisting the police with their inquiries, he checked the CCTV of himself signing in the hostel's guest book, which he later took, and the jury subsequently found him not guilty of rape, taking the accused down to just 6. With 4 scars on the leg of 24-year-old Bruno Abrantes, John Settle OBE, a renowned forensic burns consultant, stated they were consistent with a caustic soda burn, like those found on Girl A. But with Abrantes' defense counsel's own expert confirming that these were old scars caused by an accident with hot oil when Abrantes was a boy, he too was acquitted of rape and GBH, leaving just 5 of the 10 accused. Abrantes stated in court,
"I feel good about the verdict. I've been innocent from the start. The jury did the right thing. It would have been a terrible mistake to convict me. I am not a rapist."
And as the gang of 10 tumbled further, 22-year-old Miguel Almeida was also acquitted, taking the tally to just 4. On the 8th of December 2008, at Wood Green Crown Court, after an 8-week trial in which Girl A had to relive her torture, sat in agony, and was mocked by her arrogant attackers who had gang raped her, burned her, disfigured her, and almost killed her, leaving her physically and emotionally disabled. Of the 4 gang members remaining, just 3 stood before the judge, as Steven Bigby was dead. Sentenced on the 19th of January 2009, 20-year-old Hector Muaimba would serve 8 years for rape and 2 years for an unconnected robbery, 19-year-old Jason Brew to 6 years for rape, and as one of the ringleaders, 17-year-old Rogel McMorris to just 9 years for 2 counts of rape and GBH. And as most prisoners who receive fixed sentences are released on licence halfway through, the family of Girl A was shocked, describing it as
the worst day of our life. No conviction can compensate for what our daughter went through.
So rightly, the very next day, an application was submitted to the Court of Appeal by Attorney General Baroness Scotland to determine if the sentences were unduly lenient. Julian Lewis, MP for New Forest East, stated,
"Such villains considered for release halfway through their sentences makes a nonsense of imposing those sentences in the first place."
Deborah Kitson, director of the Ancraft Trust, stated, "Victims with learning difficulties face greater hurdles in getting justice and are more likely to be victims of rape." And Catherine Stone, OBE, CEO of Voice, stated, "These sentences don't come close to reflecting the brutality and horror of this attack, and completely send the wrong message to society that evil will never be punished." On the 2nd of July 2009, Lord Chief Justice Judge and Justices Simon and Blair deemed 2 of the sentences as unduly lenient. Muaimba stayed at 6 years, making him eligible for parole after 3. Brew's was increased from 6 to 9 years and eligible after 4.5. And McMorris's was increased from 9 years to 14, meaning even if he served his full sentence, he'd still be out before 2022. To many, even these punishments made a mockery of the law, along with those laws there to protect victims of rape. At the end of April 2008, having been questioned about Girl A's attack, Steven Bigby was bailed. To his girlfriend, he said he was falsely accused. To his friend Larry,
he was adamant he was going to clear his name.
And his sister Charlotte insisted, "Stephen was my big brother. He was not a violent rapist." On Monday the 12th of May 2008, as Girl A endured yet another painful skin graft, Steven Bigby, who was also on bail for a violent stabbing, headed to the West End to buy trainers and something to eat. The spat which ignited his murder was petty and pointless. At roughly 4:40 p.m, in the McDonald's on Oxford Street, a place that Girl A once went to, could only dream of going to again and probably never will, a dirty look was exchanged between Stephen and a rival gang from Waltham Forest. Like all boys pretending to be men, his friend Mark later stated,
"When the altercation started, we would have got on top of it right away. We would have pulled out our shanks,"
meaning knives, to show how brainless they truly were, being too thick to talk or diffuse it. Continuing,
"I guarantee 2 or 3 of those people Biggs was with had a knife, maybe a little .38 handgun. We would have got on top of the situation."
And that's why he died, over a perceived slight of respect that as a suspected rapist he hadn't earned. As the dirty look was given, a fizzy drink was thrown, being the way a petulant child would react when reprimanded by his mummy. And although the spat seemed like it had passed, as Steven Bigby exited the door of the McDonald's and onto the bustling Oxford Street, a 4-inch blade was thrust into his chest. Acting Detective Chief Inspector Bob Mahoney said,
"Bigby was stabbed with a bog-standard, horrible knife, and the incident lasted no more than a minute, maybe 2.
Unlike the humiliating torture of rape of Girl A, which lasted for 2 hours, and the damage which would scar her for a lifetime. Unlike the cowards who attacked Girl A and left her to die, burning in horrific pain. His friend Larry said,
"Biggs was looking into my eyes. He couldn't say anything.
But if he could, I doubt it would have been an apology." For this gang, life was all about respect. But where's the respect in gang raping a vulnerable young child? 3 days later, 18-year-old Anthony Costa of Walthamstow was found guilty of his manslaughter. And unlike the unduly lenient sentences issued to 3 of the 10 men accused of raping Girl A, Costa was given an indeterminate sentence to protect the public owing to the seriousness of his offence. Being dead, the charges against Steven Bigby were subsequently dropped. As an additional slap in the face of the family of Girl A and an insult to our justice system, many felt, rightly or wrongly, that his punishment was justified, with Richard Littlejohn of the Daily Mail writing that his death was
"No great loss. Sounds like whoever killed him did us all a favour."
with an anonymous blogger stating that
"It was a shame we can't round up all the guys like him and let them stab each other to death."
some may decry this draconian attitude of an eye for an eye, especially that Steven Bigby wasn't convicted in a court of law for the rape and GBH that his friends and family are certain he did not commit. But with the police stating
Steven Bigby would have been convicted. He would definitely have been found guilty, as his DNA was all over a towel in the bathroom.
the question we have to ask is, did he live by hate and die by hate?